I mean, I used my old friend ChatGPT to write up a little backstory of who Shel Silverstein's work and describe it for our audience.
There we
So
go.
maybe we
Let's do
can start
that.
with that, okay?
Let's start with that, and then we'll keep going.
Okay, perfect. So this week we're analyzing Silverstein's. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I'm sorry to anyone who loves his work, and I'm just offending you right now. But that's how I can read it. Anyway, so that's what we're analyzing his work, different poems. Carlos has a couple he chose from a variety of different books, and maybe work that's singled out that he just made for that one purpose. And for myself, I mostly all my quotes and poems I got are from Where the Sidewalk Ends, and that was the one I read as a kid. So that's why I chose that book for myself. So for a backstory, if you haven't ever heard of who this author is it poet? Yeah, this poet
Or
is. Yeah, I have a little brief introductory of who he is and what he does. Shel Silverstein was a multifaceted artist known for his distinctive and playful poetry, captivating illustrations, and timeless stories that have enchanted readers of all ages. Born in Chicago in 1930, Silverstein's career spanned various creative fields, including songwriting, playwriting, and cartooning. However, he is best known for his children books, particularly his poetry. His collections Where the Sidewalk Ends, A Light in the Attic, and Falling Up. His unique blend of humor, wit, and profound insight into human nature has made his work enduringly popular and influential. Silverstein's poems often feature quirky characters, unexpected twists, and a delightful sense of wonder, inviting readers to see the world through a lens of creativity and curiosity. Have you, previous to doing this for this podcast, Carlos, have you ever read any of his poems before, personally?
I mean, I've always encountered them before. I've seen some of the illustrations. I probably did read at least one of them, but I never distinctively looked at his work or even purchased a book by itself. Like maybe I've seen some of the pictures here and there, and I think some of his books are really famous. Like maybe A Light in the Attic. I've seen that one before. And his art, like you said, it's very distinctive. Like when you see some of his artwork, you can tell that it was by him.
Yeah, and for myself, I remember reading it like I feel like in sixth grade. I don't know if it was like just my language arts class in middle school or what, but I remember reading it, and I think that was my first introduction to poetry. I think was like in sixth grade, and was by Shel Silverstein here. And when I was deciding on what to do next, we chose to do something more lighthearted. And again, his books and poems are, I would say, directed to a younger audience, kids, children's. But he does have like a very unique way of writing, and even interconnecting the like child life experience with adult life, and I feel like we're going to analyze that this evening a little bit, how we can still have the inner child in us, and see what else we
Yeah,
can learn from his work. So
I
maybe
mean
you can
that's what's
start. Is
so
there something?
yeah
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
that's what's so interesting about this genre. Like now that you discussed that it's children's book, children don't write children's book. Obviously, like most children don't
Yeah,
don't
of
end up
course.
writing a novel or a book for children. It's adults that do it in most cases.
Hmm. Hmm.
But they have this audience of, okay, this needs to captivate a child, and a lot of times they do it with very few words, and they do it more with illustrations. But in the case of this author, some of his poems are a little more lengthy, and they're full of stories that could, like you said, captivate not just children but also adults. Like
Hmm.
maybe when you're writing some of these stuff for children, you're kind of thinking of yourself as a kid, and what
Hmm.
would be interesting to you, or maybe the rhymes that you would find funny, and the drawings that you would be like, oh, this is a cool drawing. And I think that makes this genre a lot different, because obviously if you're a parent I imagine you're gonna select these books and be careful, right? You don't want to have your children be exposed to something that you wouldn't want them to be exposed to, but you might find yourself drawn to some of his writing and be like, oh, this is cool.
Mhm.
Like I want to read it to him, but also at the same time you're reading it to yourself and you're like enjoying it yourself.
Yeah, and when I was like reading specifically just this book, where the sidewalk ends, I noticed that it almost seemed uh, like it was like four for kids, one for an adult, four for kids. One, like
Yeah.
that's what I felt. Like it almost felt like there was this pattern of this is super lighthearted, jokingly. Sometimes
Yeah.
there was like morals learned for a child, you know. But then all of a sudden he'll have a poem that's like deep, and you're like, I
Yeah.
don't think a child understands this. So it's almost like when nowadays, you know, a lot of movies, you know, that are directed to kids, there's a lot of jokes or things that innuendos that maybe just adults
Yeah.
understand. And those are just like little like pieces of dessert that are
Yeah.
giving to
Exactly.
adults because they're taking the kids to watch this movie. So I think that the
Yeah.
same thing was happening here, but book form, written form, you know?
Yeah, a perfect example right now. I don't know if you and your wife have gone to go see Inside Out. Like that
I,
first one was really good, and then
I
number
haven't seen the
two is
second
out,
one.
and it's kind
Have
of
you
like a
seen the
good
second one?
example of that. Like, no, not yet, but it's a
Oh,
good
okay.
example of that, right? Like it's meant for children in a way. It's a cartoon. A lot of kids want to go see it, but also like adults want to go see
Yeah,
it.
that's true. I mean, now they're introducing like an anxiety character, right? Or depression? No,
Yeah,
anxiety.
I think anxiety
Something.
is a new character. Yeah, or at least I haven't seen it yet, but I think it is one of them.
A new
Cool. So
emotion.
yeah, the first one I wanna highlight, or maybe we can even read them. This one's a short one, so we can share with the
Yeah.
audience. Is put something in, and this is if you want to find it, it's in a light in the attic. It says put something in, draw a crazy picture, write a nutty poem, sing a mumble gumble song, whistle through your comb, do a loony goony dance, cross the kitchen floor, put something silly in the world that ain't been there before. So, what are your first thoughts on that one? At first, I think it probably I didn't do the best reading. That if he would have heard me, he probably wouldn't be very happy with my reading. But I think his rhyme is probably like something that you can highlight on this poem.
Yeah, I mean, when you were reading it for myself, it, I mean, a really good lesson, right? I think it's a really good lesson in this poem for me. Like, I don't have it in front of me, but it just it's inviting kids or anyone to. It's okay to think outside of the box, and not only think outside of the box, but share it, right? Share it.
Yeah,
What did you take from it?
yeah. I mean, some of the lessons. If a kid's listening to this, he might think it sounds funny, right? Mumble
Mm-hmm.
gumble song or dance or do a loony goony dance across the kitchen floor. It's just funny. He might even laugh.
Yeah.
But when you read it as an adult, or even us reading it, we might think of the moral behind it or the lessons behind it, right? Be
Mm-hmm.
original is something that comes up to mind. Don't be afraid to do something that from the outside looks a little crazy.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you're not doing anything bad, don't be afraid to be a little different, which is a very
Mm-hmm.
valuable lesson to a kid. A kid is original probably for the first 6 years of his life. He's willing to do funny little silly things in front of his parents. But then when he gets to school, he's like dropped with all these rules. Some of them are good, obviously, like to be a
Mm-hmm.
fitting part of society. But he might not be willing to do that loony goony dance anymore. And it's a
Anymore.
good lesson to
Mm-hmm.
keep that. I
Mm-hmm.
remember seeing this not too long ago in social media. It was like a one of those videos where they share the clip of a sound and then
Okay.
do something. They add like their own version to it. And
Uh-huh.
in the meme, it was like, say the weird thing, like say that even though it's weird, like just say it.
Just say
People
it.
are
Just say
are
it.
striving for connection. Of course, they took it to an extreme. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was like a funny way of doing it, but I mean, a lesson is found there. Whereas if
Mm-hmm.
you, especially with you're with friends, people you feel comfortable with, there's certain value in being able to put something else into the world that maybe doesn't fit in exactly, right? That ain't been there before.
Yeah, and I feel like the more episodes we're doing for this podcast, it almost feels like we're building a wall with different bricks and somehow they're interconnected, right? Because like the way you're describing this, I'm connecting with previous lessons we've talked about in different books.
Yeah.
I just want to ask you, like personally, like, do you hold yourself back, or when is it when you feel comfortable? I guess being yourself, or whatever that means, right? Or being able to be silly, or whatever that looks for you. Because I think you and I have different personalities, right? You're more introverted, more. I feel like someone sees you in the room, they like, man, respect this guy, man, respeto. Offer the chair, you know. And me, I'm more of a like, I don't know, like I have like this chaotic energy. So I'm just curious in your experience, like when do you feel like that feeling of being silly?
Well, I feel like my personality in most cases, I choose or I desire or I want to not stand out, right? Like that's my
Mm,
personality in public, especially with people that don't know me very much, right? Like if I'm out in public, I don't want to stand out in any way, right? Like I don't want my clothing to stand out and be like, oh, that guy has, you know, one way or another. Like I don't want them to think, oh, he has really good style or really weird style. Like I just want to be the guy that, you don't remember. If I commit the crime, you're not gonna be able to describe me. It's gonna be like he just looked like a guy. Like, he was
he
like,
was like a he's like he's like, do you know that MySpace icon, like this like gray figure? That's Carlos.
yeah, yeah.
And
He's just,
where's that root from though? Like, it's so interesting. Like, why do you like? Because that seems like an active choice that you're actively trying to be
Well,
that.
that's what
So.
I was getting into part two, I think. And part two is just when I'm with friends, right? When I'm with friends, when
Hmm.
like I'm with you, some of our other friends that we have in common. I think that's when the second part of my personality can come out, where like I do feel like I can, like this poem invites you, do the silly thing in the world and put something that's a little different. I can do that more in those situations, right? Like where I don't
Okay.
feel as likely that I'll bring judgment to
Hmm.
myself, right? And
Hmm.
and I mean, I think maybe that's a lot of people though. Like I don't think I'm unique even in
Yeah.
that way. Like I think a lot of people, are willing to be a little more weird or a little stranger or different when they're with friends. Some
Yeah.
people are the opposite. Some people are perfectly normal when they're with you, and then they're crazy when they're in public. I don't know
It's a
many
good
people like
point.
that, but I know that they're there.
They exist. They exist for sure.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like that joke where this is my friend, but when he's around girls, he's someone else.
Yeah. He's not my friend around girls. Yeah. That's not. I don't know the guy. I don't know the guy. Yeah. I'm curious. If you think um, people, especially now more than ever, they do that less and less. Like be silly. Um, again, the word original is kind of misconstrued, as we talked about with Steal Like an Artist, but
Yeah,
the idea behind it of just doing something that you want to do you think
yeah.
because of social media, so many eyes on us, like do you think the average person doesn't do that anymore, or am I just perceiving it incorrectly?
I mean, I wouldn't know. Like, I'm probably not the moral authority on that topic and be able to say anything about it. But I think even Steal Like an Artist, right? When it mentions the
Mhm.
word original and how we all take and we steal from different sources, different personalities. I think a lot of people do that, and that's the best way to find what you are, right? Like
Mhm.
you are a certain way, and I observe you, and I'm like, that's really cool. But maybe he went a little too high in the being loud part, and I was like, I want to be like that, but maybe dial back the loudness and how he tends to fill a room when he walks in, like.
Yeah.
And we all
Intuition.
do that from different people and different sources, maybe even people we've never met, right? Like people that we
Yeah.
observe online, and now more than ever, it seems like the world is very connected, and you get to, if you use it right, be experience different cultures and see different things and kind of take a little bit here and there, and see where you can like put something a little different, or even it doesn't have to be different, but just you got to put something out there.
Yeah.
I mean, this is my going outside the box and going outside my comfort zone.
Yeah, this is you being silly, the podcast,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I feel like little by little you've been kind of like, it's gonna sound like a heavy word, but grooming me into a podcaster. Like when you
Yeah,
met me, I
so
would have never even like.
Yeah, that's true.
Considered it.
Yeah, so those, I mean, most people or anyone who's really listening to this podcast probably knows us because that's the only people that are, supporting us, and we appreciate it. So thank you for listening and watching. Like interested in personalities that were different than mine, because I was curious, like of what made them who they are, just what made me who I am. But I was, and Carlos, man, you made it so hard, bro. Like I try to be like his friend, and I'll ask him questions, and he was like, everything close to the chest. Like, nah, I'm not gonna show you my cards. Like, nah, like you gotta earn this trust.
Yeah. So to everyone listening, Joel does not take no for an answer. It's kind of his problem. He needs to get help on that.
Poem that I'm gonna start with. I think is. So can I do two? Can I start with two, Carlos? Is that
Yeah,
possible?
you can start with 2.
Okay,
I'll allow
I
it.
appreciate it.
We'll tell the production to edit it.
So the reason, the first one, we don't have to analyze it too deeply, but I thought it gives you a perspective on Shell, on his personality, maybe, or maybe a little bit of more insight in his mind. It's
Okay.
the first poem of Where the Sidewalk Ends, and it starts with invitation. It starts, if you're a dreamer, come in. If you're a dreamer, a wisher, a liar, a hoper, a prayer, a magic bean buyer, if you're a pretender, come sit by my fire, for we have some flax golden tales to spin. Come in, come in. And that's the invitation. And I felt like it's such a great poem to start this book because it's admitting to you that for you to really enjoy what you're about to read, you have to buy in. You can't have one foot out, one foot in. It's for me, at least that's what I'm hearing when I read this,
Yeah.
because it's saying that he's calling out all people who are dreamers, magic being buyers, basically saying anyone with an imagination. You need an imagination to consume the following words that you're going to read. And I just feel like it gives a little bit of insight on how he writes and his whole goal of helping, especially kids, because again, these kids, it's directed to children, to
Yeah.
be to have an imagination of what you're reading and really be involved in what you're reading. Do you think imagination is something that, because of movies, books, everything we have, entertainment, consistent dopamine, do you think that people uh, use less and less imagination in their lives, in their day-to-day lives?
It's certainly possible, right? I think a kid nowadays doesn't have to play with imaginary toys. He can, get one toy, an iPad, and it's full of cartoons, full of movies, full of this at its core rush of dopamine that he
Mhm.
doesn't need to like buy little toy cars and play around like we used to when we were growing up. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that's any better, right? I'm not saying like that's the only way to have a childhood. Those kids can become, very smart and very, live very fulfilling lives, but
You're
they're not
being
going to
too
need to
kind.
use
You're being too
imagination
kind.
as much. Why?
Give a hot take. Give a hot take.
You say something controversial.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the controversial part regarding that poem you just read.
Yeah.
It says if you are, and if I'm not mistaken, because we're also at the same time we're doing a blind review, right? Because
Yeah.
you don't know what poems I read, I don't know what poems you read.
Exactly.
This is the first time I've heard this one specifically, and it's a very
Yes.
interesting one because
Yeah.
it's an invitation, and it says if you are, a dreamer, I don't think any one of us would have a problem in someone thinking we're a dreamer. Well, maybe some of us would. Maybe there is some like, oh, you're a dreamer. Maybe there is an issue with that one. But, you're a liar. That is a problem. Like, you wouldn't want anyone to say you're a liar. Yet, he says, if you're a liar, you can still come in. And I think what he means by that, and here again, it could take on different meanings to different people. He says, if you are this or that, you can still come in. But if you don't know who you are, then maybe you can't. Right? At the same time, like even if you like, let's say something as harsh as you're a liar, you can still enjoy this book, even if there's something that like bad about you, we could say, or something that most
Okay.
people would judge. But it does take knowing yourself, knowing
Okay.
what you are, and I think for any part of life, knowing who you are, it is a very important part, right? Like if you know who you are, you'll be able to take those invitations to learn more and kind of, expand on your knowledge of life and things in general. But if you don't know, or if you don't, more importantly, if you don't admit it to yourself, right? Because what if you're a liar, but you don't want to admit it? Like, oh, I'm not a
Yeah.
liar, And I think maybe what the author is trying to bring out is, regardless of anything that you are, even if it's not very, we could say, admirable or lovable or cool, you can still, in his way, come in or enjoy what he has to show.
Okay. That's why I love this podcast, because you literally took it away. I didn't even think about, honestly. I mean, that's the cool thing. We have different perspectives. Because when I
Yeah.
did think that he used, it's so interesting that he did use the word liar, right? But for me, when I was reading it and I was seeing the other words or the titles of the other, people, so to speak, the dreamers, wishers,
Yeah.
hoper, prayer. For me, I was like, okay, how does the liar fit into this? Okay.
Yeah.
And for me, I mean, again, kids don't lie. It's bad. Anyone, it's not good. It's a terrible habit to have. But, okay, just a devil's advocate here is that a liar needs imagination to create stories,
Yeah.
right? If there's one positive, right, is that you have to be
Yeah.
creative, right? You have to be creative to be a liar, right?
What
So,
what if he was talking about lying to yourself? I didn't think of that side. Is that how you analyze it? That lying to yourself or lying to other people?
oh man, I said like lying to other people, not lying to
Lying to other
myself.
people?
Yeah,
Because I
yeah.
feel like most people are much more guilty, including myself. Are much more. It's much more possible that we lie to ourselves than others.
Oh wow. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
Who knows if maybe he was referring to that? I mean, we could probably break it down a little more, but we have a couple of poems to get through.
Yeah. So yeah, I just thought this was such a good poem because it's inviting this imagination, right? Be imaginative to
Yeah,
enjoy this the following poems you're going to read. Okay, so the next poem, it is like a little bit, in my opinion, a little bit deeper. There's more meat on the bone. So let me pull it. It's actually the title of the book, or this poem book, right? So let me find it here. Number 64, Where the Sidewalk Ends. Okay. It says, there is a place where the sidewalk ends, and before the street begins. And there the grass grows soft and white. And there the sun burns crimson bright. And there the moon bird rests from his flight, to cool in the peppermint wind. Let us leave this place where the smoke blows black, and the dark street winds and bends. Past the pits where the asphalt flowers grow, we shall walk with a walk that is measured and slow, and watch where the chalk white arrows go, to the place where the sidewalk ends. Yes, we'll walk with a walk that is measured and slow, and we'll go where the chalk white arrows go. For the children, they mark, and the children, they know the place where the sidewalk ends. So, this poem describes like this mystical place where the sidewalk ends, and he's depicting this contrast, right, of like this beautiful, like natural place, right, where there's birds, there's grass, it's beautiful.
yeah,
And then he compares it to asphalt, where the asphalt flowers grow, past the pits. It says dark streets. Let us leave the place where the smoke blows black. So maybe like industrial, the city, right?
yeah,
Uh, so in this poem, there's this contrast between the, for so to speak, a city life, and the natural world, so to speak. Um, so the reason I appreciate this is that it says at the end, for the children they mark, and the children they know the place where the sidewalk ends. And I was curious to ask you more so. Do you think children have more access to this place where the sidewalk ends, to this imaginative place where they're happy or enjoying life as a child? Do they have easier access than maybe an adult?
Yeah. Well, honestly, it's interesting. This is the first time I read this poem,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't feel like I know where the sidewalk ends. So I don't know if I'm a little lost. But he says children know. So it's making me think
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm not a child enough to understand where this
Mm-hmm.
sidewalk place ends.
Mm-hmm.
But something that is in that I did take from the poem was his, he repeated this phrase. It's
Mm-hmm.
measured and slow, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you think of a highway, it's very hectic, it's very crowded, things move very quickly. When you think of a sidewalk, I'm thinking more like a scroll, like a stroll. It's not a scroll, a
Stroll.
stroll. Where you're strolling, maybe in the afternoon. Right now it's pretty cloudy. You walk out and you just go for a
Mm-hmm.
nice little walk. Maybe it's measured and slow. Like you're not really going for distance, or you have a goal in mind. And I think that's where kids do have an advantage over adults, right? Adults have all these responsibilities, all these things in their head, the to-do list, they got to get through all these things that they have to get done.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas children, they probably take life day by day, and they just look, maybe that's, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but they look for fun, right? Like they're
Yeah.
looking more for the things they enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure as a parent, you probably want to limit that to some degree, but in another way, like that is kind of what makes being a kid so beautiful, right? Like that
Yeah.
you should be able to not care about these other things that adults should care about, and
Yeah.
you just take life a little more slowly. Which an argument would be, if that's the way life was meant to be lived all our lives, or is if that's like a special, time period in our life that doesn't come back at all. What is your take on that? Can you bring back some of those childhood moments into your adult life?
That's a good question. I think there is a power in just meditating and reflecting on past memories, right? Past stories. And if you think about like maybe your experiences now with your family, like now that we're,
Yep.
we're adults, right? We're not kids anymore. Like, and you see your, cousins that you grew up with or grew around, and you can sit around a fire, a couch, and just talk about stories of like as a child, right? And like it
Yep.
brings laughter and positive joy. And so I do think there's a way to like reach back, right? At this innocence or this like very just innocent joy of being a child and not thinking of any other things. I
Yeah.
do think it's harder though. I do think it's harder because as a child, you're in the moment. You're just enjoying it, right? You
Yeah.
don't have any responsibilities. You just, what are you going to do today? I don't know. Like, I'm going to, let's cause some havoc, That's the type of child I was.
Yeah.
And I felt like this poem was trying to invite the reader to escape. I felt like it was like an escapism type of poem, like inviting the reader to escape, like try to escape your reality from time to time. And it's basically saying it's okay. And I do feel like children, at least in my opinion, have an easier access to escape because they don't have anything to be
Yeah.
responsible for. So they can go to that imagination place, or they can just doodle on a notepad for hours
Yeah.
because they don't have responsibilities. So I do think
Yeah.
children have an easier access to get there, but I don't think it's impossible. But when I was reading this, I was thinking to ask you, do you have any particular like joyful stories you have as a child that you can share with me? Like anything that you like look back on with like just joy and happiness, something you experienced?
That's kind of a funny question, because I don't particularly have like any bad memories of childhood. Like it's not
Mhm.
like this traumatic event or anything like that. But I think
That's good.
I was
Shout out
kind
to
of
your parents.
forced. Maybe I was forced to grow up too soon in some ways, and Like I feel like that's the case for a lot of adults, right? They feel like they grew
Yeah.
up too soon and they want to go back to being a
Mhm.
child. I don't know if that's the case with me, but I do remember like when I was younger, like wanting to grow up, right? Like wanting to be an adult, wanting to finish school, wanting to work, wanting all these things that you think will give you more freedom. If only you knew that you probably will never have the level of freedom you used to have. But I think, having that life, not perspective, but that life or that common habit of always looking back and wanting that yesterday, wanting whatever you had in the past is not really healthy, right? Like, because you cannot go back. You cannot
Mhm.
go back and repeat, the childhood that you lived. Even if you
Yeah.
went back to your hometown and you went to the children's museum like you used to, or went to the zoo, you're not a kid anymore, right?
Yeah.
And in some degrees, you're not able to repeat. It's not repeatable.
Mm.
But something that would be respectful of a child is a child doesn't have any like retrospection or the ability to look back that much. I imagine from 5 to 12 at least you don't, to be able to analyze the past as much, or be able to look forward into like these big goals of 10, 5, 20 years in the future. And maybe
Mhm.
there's some children out there that do, like, but I'm saying in my personal case we don't have that.
Mhm.
I didn't have that, but I did have that desire to be an adult. And maybe now the most respectful thing to myself as a child would be to keep that enthusiasm about being an adult, instead of trying to repeat what I can't anymore, like trying to go back to that. And I think the ways that I keep alive, my way of being a child is more to like, do or like watch some of the things that I enjoyed when I was little, like maybe some cartoons,
Power
maybe some
Rangers.
movies, things like that, right? Like things that remind you. And even if you look at them now and they're kind of silly, there's a lot of shows when I was little that I would watch and I would just start laughing. Like they were so funny. Like in my mind, they were like extremely hilarious. And then I look at them now and I'm like, it's repetitive. It's kind of like predictable. Like they're doing the same joke. But out of
Uh,
respect for myself, I'm like, okay, it's so cool. Like I'm not gonna hate on it, right?
no,
Because
of
that would
course.
be disrespectful to what I used to think.
Okay. Yeah. That's a good perspective to have. Though I do agree that it's unhealthy to consistently look back, um, because then you're not enjoying the moment. You're just wasting time, right? I
Yeah.
think there is like a time and place, like I mentioned earlier, like where you can look back with fondness and happiness. But I do
Mhm.
think there's a difference between looking back with fondness and happiness and looking back with, oh, I want that, because you can't have that back. It's
Yeah.
more so like, man, I had a great childhood. I enjoyed it. Now, what can I do now to keep enjoying in my life? And like you said, like how can I pay tribute to little Carlos or little Joel? Uh,
Yeah.
so maybe, like for example, me growing up, like um, I always wanted like my cousins always like had like the fancy stuff, fancy toys, video
Yeah.
games. I usually I didn't. So I always wanted it. I always like, man, my dad wouldn't let me. And long story short, I couldn't. But now, like that's my little thing. Like I bought myself a Switch. Like I always
Yeah.
wanted like Mario Kart, and I bought the games. Like and again, do I play them every day? No, I don't. I don't have time for it.
Yeah.
But it's something. It's like a tribute to like what I to my little me that now
Yeah.
you have it, and you can enjoy it a little bit. So
That was a good one. Let's. Are you ready to move on to the next one, or do you want to keep
yeah, let's do
discussing
it.
this one?
No, let's do
Okay,
it.
I found one in a book he named "Following Up." Falling up, which is kind of an interesting phrase. Usually fall down, but this is falling up. And it's titled Snowfall. And as I read it, you might want to think of like, I mean, at least it brought up some ideas of like financial success, savings, inheritance, things that we plan for in the future, and maybe how silly those could be if we're not careful, right? The name is Snowfall, and it says, I made myself a snowball. A snowball, not snowfall. Snowball. I made myself a snowball, as perfect as could be. I thought I'd keep it as a pet and let it sleep with me. I made it some pajamas and a pillow for its head. Then last night it ran away. But first, it wet the bed. It's kind of a funny one, actually. A kid would probably laugh, especially
Yeah.
when you read it with the artwork. But
Yeah.
there's a moral behind it. There's some things, as much as you love them, you can't really keep them for tomorrow. Like, what are some examples of that? Like, what are some things that if you accumulate too much of, it kind of defeats the purpose,
I mean,
no matter
you
how
might have
much you
to.
like it. I
I
mean,
mean,
I can go first, right? Like
go
fruit.
first. Go
Let's say
first.
you love
Yeah.
strawberries. You can't stock up on strawberries too much, right? Like
Yeah.
if you buy too many strawberries,
They'll go
unless you
bad.
have like a little method of like freezing them, or I've heard about dry freezing. It's pretty cool. I haven't done it, but maybe I'll buy a dry freezer one day. Unless you do that, within a couple of days, some of them are gonna start going bad,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not gonna be any good within maybe a week. Maybe a week is like the max, or a week and a half.
Yeah. Well, it's a
But
lot of that.
yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean the biggest thing that rings to our head is because we live in a world where we need money to survive. I think, financial security, or that word, is thrown out to us left and right. Are you are you financially secure? Are you ready to retire? Even though I'm 27, like that's thrown out in our face all the time. So, which there is some wisdom behind it. I'm not gonna say that that's not smart, but I
Yeah,
do think there's this reality that we can't control tomorrow. So to be
yeah,
balanced with whatever you are accumulating, like, because like I think there's an extreme, because I think there's people who, it's a good thing to have savings. I think savings are good, but there's people that don't, like, let's say they love ice cream, right? And they love it, and they pass a ice cream parlor, and instead of buying that ice cream, they're like, no, well, I gotta save for tomorrow.
yeah,
And for me, it's like, no, I just enjoy the ice cream. Buy yourself an ice cream. Yeah, you didn't save the $5 or $3, whatever the cost, but
yeah,
enjoy the ice cream. Because what if tomorrow, like, I don't know, the banks blow up or something, and your money's worth nothing,
yeah. It's funny that the I guess the symbolism behind this idea of a snowball, right? And at the end, he says it wet the bed. When you say that phrase, you hear it in movies and TV shows. Oh, he wet the bed. You're like, oh, he made a mistake. Like that's what it means, right?
Yeah,
And the idea that he wanted to keep this as a pet is silly, right? Only a child would do that. Someone that
yeah,
doesn't know.
yeah.
But when it comes to money, like let's say you generate enough and you keep this huge amount, but the reality is we don't know when, you know, something bad will happen, we'll pass away, and what will happen with all of that? What will happen with the money we accumulated? Someone else will enjoy it, right? Like it won't
Yeah.
really benefit us. It won't be like a pet that you keep and you love and you enjoy. It'll just
Mhm.
be, I heard a saying not too long ago, and it kind of like a silly, funny way of thinking about inheritance. And it said, inheritance, or leaving money after you die, is a mathematical mistake. It means you didn't run the numbers right. It means you saved
Dang.
so much and you overworked that there was left over. Like if you would have worked less, you would have enjoyed life more. Like there was more work in your life than there should have been. Like there should have been less work.
That's a
And
good
obviously, like
point.
it's the first time that I see it that way, right? Because most parents and most adults want to leave this huge, enormous amount of wealth to their children. Would it really benefit them though? Like, and that's kind of like, okay, now we're getting into like a hot take, or not a hot take, but a controversial topic. And I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't
I
know.
don't
Like
know. No.
some parents would leave everything to their children. Others, and I've even seen this like in interviews with like billionaires and people like that, where they're like, we're not gonna leave them anything because it would ruin them. Like I don't know if I agree
Yeah.
with that either. What
Yeah.
would be the equivalent of wetting the bed?
Yeah, exactly, right? I think what's equivalent. Yeah. I mean, my hot take is that, I mean, it's never zero, but I think majority of the cases, leaving that amount of money to anyone won't benefit them in the long term, right?
Yeah,
Especially, again, there's case to case. I can't say there's any, but you need so much education to like even handle any of that. Like how do you even handle such a thing? And
yeah,
then you become reliant on something else instead of yourself. I just do think that there's a lot of lessons in life that is
yeah,
lost in that gift. I do think it's, it comes from maybe a place of love. But when you're speaking earlier about like dying with like zero, it's such a cool concept. It's a cool concept. I never really thought about it too much. How, if you die with savings or something, you got the calculation wrong. And
Yeah,
again,
you did the math wrong.
uh, well, can I say I 100% agree? Maybe not, but I do think it opened my brain to considering it, or
Yeah.
like reading more into that idea.
I mean, it's
Oh,
worth thinking about. At least, like when we're doing this podcast, we're trying to share ideas. We're trying to share what we think of. It doesn't really mean that that's what I feel 100%. Because
yeah,
I mean, obviously,
yeah,
I if I stop to think about it, I probably fall somewhere in between. Like I'm not like
yeah,
one way or another,
hmm
personally.
yeah,
But I mean, when you think about these things, it does kind of like maybe elicit a thought where you're like overworking or you're at the office at 9 p.m. and your son calls you and he wants to go watch a movie, and you, instead of telling him like, oh no, I'm working, and in your mind, I'm sure most parents are like, oh, I'm working for the kid, I want to make sure that he has a future.
mm,
But you know if you're really doing this for the kid, for your son, maybe it's worth it to leave that job at that time and go watch the movie that
hmm
he wants to go watch, right? Like
yeah,
leaving that money and treating money like that pet, of saving it, I want to keep it,
hmm
might be what makes you wet the bed. Because what if you pass away earlier than you think, and you don't accumulate
yeah,
as much as you predicted? Well, all those memories that you could have made with your son are no longer
yeah,
there. And I think those memories are going to last a lot longer than the money. Like the money will go within a couple of years of you passing away, but the
hmm
time you spend with your family, the time you spend with your children, those will probably last more.
yeah. And now when like thinking about it a little bit further about that illustration, how did the child wake up, right? The bed was wet, but potentially it's like with sadness, right? Like, oh man, like my snowball, right? Like my thing I
Yeah,
held with value, right? That I put pajamas on it to take care of it. Oh, it's gone, right? Like
yeah,
at least that's what I am imagining, a sad child to seeing this in front of them. So for me, I was thinking of like, oh, what other way or what other things in life can this connect to? And I can think of like maybe like our childhood, or maybe when we're, aging, maybe like you're so fond of how you used to look, or when I was younger, or my weight or whatever. You're so
yeah,
fond or holding on to these past memories that you're missing out on the moment, really, because you're trying
yeah.
to hold on to something that's not there anymore. That's a good poem. I'm surprised how deep we went, because when you're first reading it, I'm like, where is he taking this? Because I was like, how is this a deep poem? I love it. Is
Uh,
I
was
got one.
all right, hit it.
Okay, this is again. I think I'm sorry I chose a lot of these longer ones. Um, but I have Hector the Collector.
Okay.
Okay, Hector the Collector. And yeah, and everyone who's listening to us or watching us, uh, be mindful that none of us are. He's hearing this for the first time, so let's see how we consume this poem. Okay, Hector the Collector collected bits of. Oh, sorry, man, I read that terribly. Hector the Collector collected bits of string, collected dolls with broken heads, and rusty bells that would not ring. Pieces out of picture puzzles, bent up nails and ice cream sticks, twists of wires, worn out tires, paper bags and broken bricks, old chipped vases, half shoelaces, Gatling guns that wouldn't shoot, leaky boats that wouldn't float, and stopped up horns that wouldn't toot, butter knives that had no handles, copper keys that fit no locks, rings that were too small for fingers, dried up leaves and patched up socks, worn out belts that had no buckles, electric trains that had no tracks, airplane models, broken bottles, three-legged chairs and cups with cracks. Hector the Collector loved these things with all his soul, loved them more than the shining diamonds, loved them more than glistening gold. Hector called to all the people, "Come and share my treasure trunk." And all the silly, sightless people came and looked and called it junk. So that's it. The Hector the Collector. So to break down the poem a little bit further, as we can see that is describing this character. His name is Hector, and he collects things that to the common eye is junk, right? It's things that are worn out, they don't work, or maybe they had an original purpose, but now they're not useful. But it highlights that he cherishes these items. He sees values in them, even if others don't. So much so at the end of the poem explores the theme of value and the perception of that, because to him, he describes it as, he says, "Come and share my treasure trunk." And at the end it says, "And all the silly, sightless people came and looked and called it junk." And I think that's such a powerful last phrase there to end it. But I feel like Hector embodies maybe individuality and values of what he enjoys, even though maybe others don't. So what I'm trying to get to with this long explanation of this poem is, uh, is do you think a lot of people also like junk, so to speak, like Hector? But because majority of people view it as junk, they don't pursue whatever that is, whether it's, a certain passion, maybe they like
Yeah.
painting, drawing, whatever, because other people don't value that thing, they hold themselves back. Do you think that's the case?
I mean, I'm in a very like thin ice right now because I don't want to promote a hoarding lifestyle. we're gonna put the hotline number here if you got a hoarding problem. There's help out there. But it doesn't seem like the author is trying to describe that in Hector the Collector. In fact, I
No.
think the poem is, even though it's a little bit longer,
Mm-hmm.
it's just short enough. I feel like it was missing this better ending of Hector the Collector figuring out that actually all those things were antiques and they're worth millions. Like
That would
it
have been a
ends
cool
with
ending.
them being junk.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, but I think it, like, I think you actually hit something that it brought to my head, which is this idea of intrinsic value or value, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like things have intrinsic value, like they're worth something in themselves. Like our phone, we have things that are around our home. Our home itself has a certain value,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also like what we could call emotional value, right? Like I'm sure that if I Google what is the golden retriever worth, I'm gonna get an answer. Like it has a certain amount of worth out there in the market. But my Bruno, is worth a lot more because he's my
Mm-hmm.
pet. I love him.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
same thing with Hector. Like even though he was collecting all these bits of stuff, this misfits, rejects, junk as
Mm-hmm.
people call them. It's a funny one. He seemed to collect things that had a main purpose, but they were not able to do that main purpose anymore because he said he collected boats that didn't float. Like, what good is a boat that doesn't float? Like, you're not gonna be able to sell that. It has no use anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But to him, they were treasure, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can really apply that to things in itself. But I think it's very true of people, ideas, all these things that might not have value, and other people looking out, looking in from the outside might be like, oh, what is that guy doing? He's wasting his time. Why is he collecting? Why is he traveling so much? Why is he doing all these things? That's not going to make him more money. That's not going to make him,
Mm-hmm.
more successful in their eyes. But to him, they're a treasure. He really enjoyed it. Hector was collecting things that were valuable to him. And I think if we were to do that, stop looking at what people value. Like
Mm-hmm.
instead of focusing, oh, I want to collect all these things that people like, that people think are valuable, or that, I feel like people do that when they collect like stamps and coins. They're more worried about what they're going to be worth one day. People are going to pay a lot of money for this.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's right. If you're investing, that should be your goal. But if you're just doing something for fun, then you should do it just for fun. You should be willing to do like Hector, collect all these things. Even if people see it as junk, they can
Mm-hmm.
still be your treasure. Even if people wouldn't be willing to give $1 for it.
Yeah, and when I was reading this, for me, it almost seemed like a critique to materialism a little bit.
Yeah.
I felt like it was trying to contrast two value systems, right? Like we had like this with society, right? Society was saying his collection was junk, but he valued it and he was happy and he called it a treasure. For me, when I was seeing this like slight critique to materialism of what actually things are worth and why, it almost made me questioning, why do I buy what I buy, right?
Yeah.
Um, like Hector, he was maybe getting these things or maybe even buying these things. But when he
Yeah.
bought them, he was happy. Like, oh, this is my treasure. I value it. And I think in the crazy Amazon world we live in, man, like the speed of purchase, things that you can just get immediately is
Yeah.
crazy how fast you can get stuff. Again, and this is in in a first world country that has access to internet or whatever. But what I'm
Yeah.
trying to get to is like now more than ever, we have access to just buying things.
Yeah. I mean, they've done an amazing job of removing any sort of friction from a transaction, right? Like
Literally, it's
don't have,
frictionless.
you don't need a wallet, you don't need a phone. Like I think I've seen that at Whole Foods. I've never used it, but I think you can use your palm or something, and you can pay with your
Dude,
palm.
bro, the marketing though, I heard Disney, like you go to Disney World, I heard that they give you a bracelet now, right? That you connect your card to. And it's
Yeah.
such a frictionless experience. You just go to the store, you want to get a coffee, they just beep, beep. Like
Yeah.
like literally, and then at the end you're just charging your card, right? But like they make it so easy for you to spend because you're not physically pulling out a wallet, counting the $20 for the 7-ounce water bottle, like you're just like beep, 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 and just buying everything.
Oh
Um,
man, I'm gonna miss the good old fashioned painful way of pulling out.
a wad of ones. Yeah. And what I was trying to get to ultimately with all like how we have so much, it's always so easy to buy things, is that question of why am I buying it, I think is getting looser and looser.
Yeah.
Like it's more, oh, I want it, right? And you buy it, and then it ends up in storage. It ends up in storage.
Yeah.
You don't really value it. You don't treasure it. At
Yeah.
least you can, we can argue that Hector valued his things. He knew exactly what he owned,
Hmm.
what he had, and he valued it. So
Yeah.
it almost made me ponder on myself, like when I buy things, I'm just beep, 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 like,
I
am I
think
being influenced
the
by
the
materialism?
more I think about Hector, though, like in your eyes, Hector is, let's summarize this in generic terms: a hero or a
Yeah.
villain. What do you
I
think?
think he's a hero.
You think he's a hero, right? He's
Yes.
collecting all
That's
these things that to other people have no value, right? Like, and he values them and he loves them. He kind of gives them a second chance of
mhm,
living their full intended life, of
mhm,
having someone that loves them. And I think, when you collect, maybe not things, but when you go into a more like symbolic way of maybe friendships, right? A lot of people, and this is strange, but I have seen it live. People even collect friendships based on what, value it brings to others. Like, oh, like they start name dropping. Like, I know this doctor, like I know this lawyer, and all like they want to impress
mhm,
others on based on their connections.
mhm,
But it seems like Hector was collecting all the rejects, like all the things and people, in my symbolic way, people the
mhm,
others have found no value in, and he saw them as a treasure. And he, in a way, that's kind of like a service to provide to society, where you find a use or something lovable in what people are already like kind of like disregarding as having no use left in them. Do you
yeah.
feel like there's something there, like, or am I
No,
reading
I
too
no,
much into it?
no, I didn't see it that way, but I can see where you're going with it. I see what you're going with it. I think you're right. I think that he is seeing value in things that, again,
Yeah.
based on some whatever weird societal standard, doesn't have value. Because like think of we can illustrate this with art, right? There's people who've we've all done it. We've all done it. We go to a
Yeah.
museum and you're like, that's worth $20,000, like, and we all joke around like we had the skill to do it ourselves, which we don't. But we're like, oh,
Yeah.
I could have painted that. But
No.
someone out there is passionate enough that values that thing. So who am I to throw mud on their value system? right?
Okay. Now here's I'm gonna throw this to you and to the listeners. This is kind of be like a little test, right?
Oh gosh.
And this is like, let's see where you fall in this. I'm kind of making it up on the spot, so we'll see how it goes. Imagine you have a piece of art. This, call it a drawing or a piece of art like
Painting.
we would find in a museum, a painting. And you cannot sell it. You cannot trade it. So whatever it is worth in money is completely meaningless because you're not going to trade it. You're not going to sell it. You're going to keep it in your house forever. What would you rather have? A piece of art that you love and you find beautiful and you treasure, like this is amazing, it goes well with my home, love it, but every visitor tells you they hate it and that it's ugly and that it's worth nothing. Or the opposite, a piece of art or painting that to you is ugly, you don't even like it there, maybe your wife convinced you and it's there, but you hate it. But every time someone walks in, they admire it, they love it, they pay you, they offer you $10 million for it.
Jeez.
What would you rather have, like in your home?
I feel for me that when you described the first setting, for me it was like, well, it seems like I gotta get new friends. Like I gotta get some new friends. Like so,
Not that bad.
so for me, like the answer is option A, right? Like I want to love whatever I love. But if someone's hating on it, for me, it's like I gotta get better friends, fam. Like, why
Well,
are they hating on
can you
me?
take the heat? I mean, Hector took the heat. They
That's a good
didn't like
question.
it. They said it was junk.
Okay, can I add a little asterisk? Can there be more like for example, let me give you an illustration. Let's say my wife painted it, right? Now there's an added emotional connection to this painting.
Well, there
If that's
was an emotional connection before. You liked it.
no, yeah, but like if it's a purchase, it's way different than a gift of someone else. Okay, do you agree with me or no?
It is, but I think that's a cop out. I think you got to decide on the parameters I set. Like what I know where you're going with it, but it's interesting because this isn't. You might not be able to come up with an answer, but the fact that you were trying to make that first one work is kind of an answer, right?
Yeah.
Like
I do.
you'd be more willing to have that one that people hate, but you love it and you find it valuable.
I think so. I think in the long run, I would, because
Okay.
again, here's another variable to throw in the place. Who sees it more, me or the people that are coming into my house? Me. So like if I have a painting I hate, I'm the one that sees it the most. Like if there's a painting that people love, but they come over once in a while and they're like, oh, this is amazing, but I hate it. Like I'd rather see something every day that I love than have a couple people just be haters,
Yeah.
But wait, you can't cop out. What about
Okay,
you?
let's go to the next question.
You can't cop out. You can't cop out. But what about you? Option A or B, and why?
I mean, it's hard for me because I'm the one that kind of like made the question. And in
So
a
you're
way, I
biased.
feel like A is option one is a correct and morally, upstanding answer to the question, right? Because if you answered B, even if that's the truth, I mean, the fact that someone's willing to offer 10 million, even if I'm not going to trade it, would that be enough to make me like it? Like, would that change my perspective on it? It shouldn't, right? Like, the obvious answer is A. The obvious answer is number one. You should go with what you love and, select that even if people hate it. But, when I think of the function of art or anything that, that's material, like this wouldn't translate if we're talking about a friend, if we replace a piece of art with a friend, it wouldn't translate. But when it comes to art, maybe the value of a piece of art to me is something that you can talk about, something that people like. So in that way, my opinion versus 100 opinions is outweighed. And am I worth more than 100 people's opinions? I don't know. Like if you analyze it that way, maybe you could work out answering number two, but I still think I would go with A, right? Like in fact, it would probably be, it's probably the only answer. Like if you go with B, like you're admitting that the way you value things in your life is through others. And I think that's a
Mhm.
hard admission. Even though it's true for a lot of people, I think I wouldn't want to admit that.
Yeah, and if you can internally can admit that, well, then try to work on that, right? Because
Yeah.
for me, what that's signaling, right? We've had this conversation before that I've always had a. I think there was a moment, I don't know how old I was, when I started to. I think it was an issue with my dad that I started to want not let others control my emotions. because
Okay.
if someone's because if someone's affecting me, right, like let's say they make me angry, they have some set of control over me, and I
Yeah.
hated that idea. I hated the idea that someone else is somehow controlling me. So it helped me to like forgive people. It helped me to not internalize external factors to my life. It was a great thing. I loved it.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I applied that to my life. So with this case, with material things, for me, that signals that someone else is controlling a big part of my life. And not only is it a big part of my life, it can potentially ruin my life. Because, for example, the world values materialism. Buy the biggest house, buy the biggest, newest car,
Yeah.
technology. You know, you can keep adding clothes, name brands. If we go through their value scale, if we go through that value scale, then they're controlling me, and maybe I can't even afford those things, but I buy them because my value system is someone else's value system, and then now I'm ruining my life a little bit. So
Yeah.
that's my fear of someone living that way, or even myself if I fall into that scale.
Yeah. I mean, we could probably spend more time with Hector the Collector, but we should probably move on just
Shout out to Hector the
to respect the
Collector.
time of our listeners. Yeah. He's a true one.
It's a true one.
Is it my turn? Yeah, it's my turn.
Your turn. Yep.
So I guess it's been so hot here in Arizona that I've been kind of like reading about snowballs and frozen dreams. This next one is called Frozen Dream.
Okay.
And you find it in the book of poems A Light in the Attic is the name of the book. So a frozen dream. I'll take the dream I had last night and put it in my freezer. So someday long and far away, when I'm an old gray geezer, I'll take it out and thaw it out. This lovely dream I've frozen, and boil it up and sit me down and dip my old cold toes in. So we're at Snowball and now Frozen Dreams. Do you feel like it's even possible? Does this even make any
No.
logical sense? Or is it just comedy? Like something that's meant to sound funny? Do you think people do this where they dream of something, whether it was last night or over the lapse of a couple of years, where they have this goal or dream and they decide to put it in a freezer like it was a drink?
I do think so.
You do think so? Is
So
it
this,
possible?
I think. Do I? It depends what you mean by that. Do you mean is it possible to then achieve the dream? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Is it,
No es cero. I
what
don't
are your
think it's
thoughts on it?
zero.
What are your thoughts on
Uh,
it? You
so
just kind of
I
like
so
mumble on.
mumble on it, mumble my rap on it, rap on it.
Yeah,
So
just chew on it.
so how I view this circumstance is almost like a mother who has an unplanned child, right?
Okay.
Maybe this mother's dream was to become a chef, right? Or loves cooking and would love
Okay.
to own a restaurant one day. That's the dream. But her circumstances changed. And now she's having a child, or hopefully with the father there helping her, but she's
Yeah.
having a child. So now she puts this dream saying, like, oh, when my son's out in college or, is an adult, I'll then try to achieve that dream. I do
Yeah.
think this happens a lot, that people put streams in the freezers. I think the percentage of the people who open that freezer and pull the dream out again is like 1%. I think a lot of people let the dreams die in the freezer. And that breaks my heart, but that's what I think. And what do you
Are
think?
there any dreams in your freezer? Is it full of dreams?
Dude, I think that's, if I would define myself, I'm like, a hobo dreamer, you know, like I have zero financial way to achieve the dreams, but I'm gonna get there one day. No, I think my wife would describe me as a big dreamer, always having ideas. I think you and I are like that. I think that's why we talk about things. We try to imagine ourselves future Joel and Carlos having a margarita in Hawaii or something, or some tropical island in somewhere. you know?
It makes me think of this idea that people put things in the kind of the back burner. Have you heard that before? Like whatever it is
Yeah.
that they hope or dream. I
Mhm.
mean, I think you mentioned a point that I wanted to bring up, but it's like career over kids, or
Mhm.
kids come in and they come over everything. Like you kind of switch gears. Like when you're on this
Mhm.
path and then something happens that this path becomes no longer viable. You cannot do it, but you're not ready to give up yet, and you put it on the freezer per se, and then you come back to it later when it's easier, when it's possible.
Mhm.
Does it taste the same? Like let's think about a meal. Like
Oh wow.
you can freeze, preserve a meal that you had or some ice cream to enjoy later, in a far away. It says here, someday long and far away. And you can just sit down and enjoy it then. Let me give an example to illustrate this. Let's say, you're young, don't have a lot of money, and your dream is to open a, coffee shop, let's say. But it's just too hard, right? Like getting the leads and the recipes and the managing employees, it just becomes an insurmountable, or, something that you can't accomplish at the moment. So you put it in the back burner and you work, you do your thing. Later on, you decide, okay, I have enough savings. This would be a lot more possible. Like this is something I can achieve. I could just easily grab it from the freezer and boil it up, and boom, it's here.
Mhm.
Does it taste the same if you wait till it's easier?
Bro,
If you wait till it's like totally possible, or
so
is there some worth and value in, this is going to be a lot harder to do now. My circumstances are a lot more difficult, but I should give it a shot anyways. What do
I
you
think
think?
I think linguistically how you're describing it being easier is incorrect, in my opinion.
Okay, what
Because
is the correct way?
no, because well, the way you're describing it, because like as long as the dream is still there, I don't think it devalues the dream once you. If anything, I think it tastes better.
Hmm.
Because this is my reasoning. Because you plan, like you're still doing things to get there. Because you're working life, you're saving money. Well, this is my coffee shop fund. This is my coffee shop fund.
Yeah.
So like you're still working for the dream. Once you get there, you'll get there. And I do think I see your perspective or where you're trying to get to of like, well, forget all the variables. I'm gonna put in the work, and if it's gonna, fight tooth and nail until I achieve this dream. I think that's cool and valuable, but I don't think it's more valuable than
Yeah.
someone who slowly grinds to get to the dream. As long as the dream isn't forgotten, is my point.
Yeah.
I think.
Now, like maybe I'm reading too much into this again, and this is why this podcast came to be, right? Because maybe we read too much into some stuff. Maybe the poem is very simple and straightforward.
The author is like, what are you guys talking about?
He's like, they completely got it wrong. But his last phrase is, when this lovely dream of him that he frozen comes back to life, he would boil it up and sit down with it and dip his old cold toes in. You see, that's interesting that he used that
Yeah.
phrase, because he
Yeah.
didn't say prepare it and eat the dream. Like we don't know if it was
Yeah.
food, we don't know what it was,
Yeah.
but he used the phrase dip my old toes in. Think, for example, like maybe your dream is not really like material, or it has nothing to do with that. Let's move aside from that. Let's say your dream is to go to Madagascar. You want to see, you want to meet the crew where the movie was filmed.
You want to meet the penguins?
Cartoon, yeah.
You want to meet Marty? You want to meet Marty?
Yeah.
Hang out with
That's
him.
your dream. That's what you want, and you can't do it, or it'd be too hard, right? Like it would require work and savings.
Mhm.
If you freeze it and wait too long, right? Like let's say you're older, you can still
Mhm.
go, but you're probably not gonna do the the excursions where you walk. You're probably gonna
Yeah.
be in the safari, just in the Jeep. If you do that, it's kind of like you just dip your toes in.
Yeah.
Does it lose value? Would it be
Yeah,
worth it
no,
to just push forward and do it and get the full experience instead of waiting and maybe make it way easier? Like it's gonna be a lot easier. You're gonna have a lot more means to actually take on this trip. But the result is that you only dip your toes in it at that point.
yeah. And I think that's what's being illustrated with this poem, because I don't think it was a positive poem. I think it, like what I was trying to get to is that I think most people, this is what happens, that they put this dream in a freezer, and then once they can kind of achieve it, they don't really get to enjoy it because they waited too long. So
No.
I don't think that that's the best way to do it, because that's going to happen. You're going to just barely a little bit enjoy it, and that's so sad. And
Yeah.
I think, again, I think majority of people live this way, because I do think society is kind of guided to, oh well, you'll retire at 60. Like, why is that the norm? Like, why do I want to retire at 60, fam? Like, what if I want to retire when I'm 33? You know what I'm saying? Like, why is this, like there's this mentality of working, 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 and then you'll get to 60 and you'll buy yourself an RV and go visit all the United States and all, like, bro, like you're old. You don't have the energy anymore. And I do think there's circumstances to circumstances, right? This doesn't fit all. But I do think there's value in planning when to pull out that dream out of the freezer, but don't wait too long because you'll get freezer burn.
Yeah. I think you're definitely right. Do you want to move on to one of your next ones?
Yeah, I have a short one. It's titled Early Bird.
Early bird.
Yes. It says, "Oh, if you're an early bird, be an early bird and catch the worm for your breakfast plate. If you're a bird, be an early bird. But if you're a worm, sleep late."
That's a short one.
so my take on this early bird here, it's like a reimagination of the phrase, right? The early bird catches a worm, right? We've heard that countless times. But that added last phrase saying, but if you're a worm, sleep late, right? So you don't get eaten by these birds.
Yeah.
So what I was, again, thinking when I read it, like first knee-jerk reaction was like, this was like, act on your circumstances, but don't let your circumstances define you either. So like take advantage, like for example, the bird, like take advantage that you're a bird and try to get the worm early, right? Like that's your
Yeah.
circumstance. But if you're a worm, right, it's counterintuitive. Like, oh, well, the worms wake up early. They're going to eat me. So let me sleep late. Let me protect myself.
Yeah.
So the angle I was kind of taking it was, am I taking advantage of my personal circumstance and not comparing myself to the bird, so to speak, or the worm, right? But just take advantage of my current circumstance.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it brings those ideas to mind, but also what really kind of like speaks or like is highlighted in my brain is this idea of waking up early.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've heard it like that phrase itself is kind of what I'm thinking, right? The early bird gets the
Mm-hmm.
worm.
Mm-hmm.
And even with us, people have been pushing this idea of wake up early, wake up at 4 a.m., work out, do these things, get started early. You're going to get so much ahead. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to get so much more done. And some people, like including myself, maybe especially my brother, we don't like to wake up early. We like to like sleep late. And, a lot of people get a lot of work done like at 11, 12. And it's different, right? Like if you try to force me to wake up early, I probably won't get much done in the morning. And if honestly, to wake up early, you have to go to sleep early.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing whether you're a bird or a worm makes a difference in how the way you're going to lead your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so knowing your circumstances and understanding them and not trying to, have this, following advice, whoever gives it, or, blanket, fits all, genre of like doing things. Like some people should do this and some other people should do this other thing. When it comes to some things, I think waking up is one of those, right? Like if you're the worm that wakes up too early, you're in trouble because the bird is coming. So I mean, I don't know. I think that's the only thing that really speaks to me on that one. Maybe that
Yeah.
is one of like for me like one of those surface poems.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm
No,
sure it
no.
has a cool illustration with it.
No, yeah, it was a lighthearted poem, and I was just curious. So you consider yourself a night owl then?
Probably more than an early bird for sure.
Yeah, and I'm the opposite. I think I consider myself early bird personally.
You were some weird mix of the both people before when I met you. You were neither.
Oh,
You
you're
would
right,
sleep.
dude. Yeah, bro. I was yeah. No, when you met me, bro, I would sleep like 3 hours. It was terrible, bro. I mean, okay, so for those who don't know, when I was in Arizona for a long time, my dad had a carpet business, and I worked for him. And we woke up because of the sun beating on us. We would wake up at 2:30 in the morning to be out of the house at 3:30 and be at the job site at 4.
Yeah.
That was like my life every day, basically, even the weekends sometimes. But I'm young, I'm young, and I have friends, and when I hang out, and well, everyone has a life going to school or work, and when people do things is in the evening. So the smart thing to do was to sacrifice my social life for my health, right? That was a smart thing to do. Like, hey, well, my
Yeah.
circumstance don't allow me to go out and hang out with my friends because I have
Yeah.
to work. But I said, nah, fam. I was like,
Yeah. It's crazy, man. You were crazy. I mean, you might end up with a pacemaker at 30, but you really lived it to the fullest back then.
it wasn't a sustainable equation, but I did it. It was fun. So yeah, I am for sure more of an early bird. I do think how you're saying there's wisdom and just understanding what works for you.
Yeah.
Don't try to force
Although,
yourself.
like you said, you're now playing the devil's advocate. I have seen or heard different things that say that humans are meant to sleep during the night. So if there's a better one of the two, I think waking up early is the healthier thing for our bodies. Like the night is meant more to rest. Like certain things happen
Yeah.
inside our body apparently during the night where it cleanses itself, and it can only happen if you're asleep. So those late night sessions maybe are not that healthy. Who knows?
Yeah, that's a good point. Have you ever done an overnight job?
Actually,
Like,
maybe I'm embarrassed to admit it, but like when you were living that lifestyle, I was like, oh, maybe I can do it. And I got a job at a company doing interpreting, and you get to select your shift, right? Like you could pick between
wait, hold on.
overnight. 'Cause
I
it
don't.
was
I
like
don't think. I don't think I know this story. Wait, what?
you don't know this story? It's
I
probably an
don't think I
embarrassing
know that.
story.
I don't think I
So
know this.
back then, when we were like going out more often, you would go to sleep like really late and wake up really early,
Yeah.
and we wouldn't like maybe like your more available time would be kind of during the day, like after 1 or 2 till like 8 is when you were more available to like go to the gym and do other stuff. Well, I had this opportunity to get a job, and I could select the schedule because it's a 24-hour company. So it's a call center. They're open 24 hours. And there was actually, it's not like I made the decision just for this, but also during the training, because it's like a week-long training, I realized that the night shift is, we could say, more boring in a way because there's less calls coming in,
Okay.
but you get paid the same. So if
Oh.
I could
Okay.
manage to stay awake during the
Yeah.
night, it would have been, a lot less work for, the income I would be making.
For
So
the
it's like,
same amount of energy you're expending, you're
exactly,
making
right? Like I
the
could
same
be,
amount.
I mean, it's not like I could be on my phone or anything, but it's like it was a regulated call center. But I could be, like doing a puzzle, or I think people took books. You could be reading a book or something like that. Something that
Yeah.
you can kind of like put to the side if a call comes in.
Yeah.
During the day, you didn't actually get those opportunities because, you were back to back most of the time. But during the night, you could. So when I selected a schedule, I think I picked the schedule that was like 12:30 to like 6 a.m. or something like that. It was crazy. That was dumb. Lasted about 2 weeks. And then I moved to like an early morning schedule. Like I think it was like 6:30 to 12:30. Because I think I was doing part time. If I'm not mistaken, I think I was only working part time.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
No, I mean, bro, it's not. We weren't meant to be working at night. I mean, you remember when I was working at the food warehouse too, like overnight when I was trying to save up to buy the ring for Lynette.
Oh,
Did you
okay.
know that?
I mean, I wasn't in New York back then, but
Oh yeah, I mean it was pandemic had hit, and I was trying to save up to get married, And my job, I was working at Lint and I was making like $16 an hour or whatever it was, like $15
Yeah.
an hour. And like it was just taking forever to save. And I'm like, man,
Yeah.
how can I make progress? So I found this, long story short, I found this food warehouse job.
Yeah.
And because of the pandemic, it wasn't shut down because it was a necessary job. It was like a food, you're
Yeah.
for food for Walmart and stuff. But my schedule was like 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. Bro, I did it for 3 months, just enough to save for the ring, and I quit. But bro, it was the worst, dude. It was the worst. Like, man, no,
I
it's
told
not
you,
fun.
man. 5 carrots was too much, but you didn't listen to me.
Whatever. I did not buy 5 carrots, everybody. I'm broke. I didn't buy 5 carrots.
If you
Shoot,
see him on the street, take his wallet.
No, I bought some moissanite, fam. Yeah, take care. I didn't want to get some blood diamonds on my hand. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, any other quotes you might? Oh, it's your turn, right?
It's my turn? Okay.
Yes.
Long one or short one? Because I think I'm running out of sunlight here.
Oh, okay.
What do you think?
This can be the last one. So maybe a long one, but this can be the last
long
one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we should read it because it is long, but I'll read it. I'll go ahead and read it.
Okay.
We can end with this one if you want because it's called The Giving Tree, poem by Shel Silverstein. Once there was a tree, and she loved a little boy. And every day the boy would come, and he would gather her leaves, and make them into crowns, and play king of the forest. He would climb up her trunk, and swing from her branches, and eat apples. And they would play hide and go seek. And when he was tired, he would sleep in her shade. And the boy loved the tree very much, and the tree was happy. But time went by, and the boy grew older, and the tree was often alone. Then one day, the boy came to the tree, and the tree said, "Come, boy, come and climb up my trunk, and swing from my branches, and eat apples, and play in the shade, and be happy. In my shade, and be happy." "I am too big to climb and play," said the boy. "I want to buy things and have fun. I want some money." "I'm sorry," said the tree, "but I have no money. I have only leaves and apples. Take my apples, boy, and sell them in the city. Then you will have money, and you will be happy." And so the boy climbed up the tree and gathered her apples and carried them away. And the tree was happy. But the boy stayed away for a while, and the tree was sad. And then one day the boy came back, and the tree shook with joy, and she said, "Come, boy, climb up my trunk, and swing from my branches, and be happy." "I am too busy to climb trees," said the boy. "I want a house to keep me warm," he said. "I want a wife and I want children, and so I need a house. Can you give me a house?" "I have no house," said the tree. "The forest is my house, but you may cut off my branches and build the house. Then you will be happy." You're dying over there, Juan.
It's sad,
It's like
bro.
a heartbreak. We're about halfway, but you're probably getting the theme of it. And so the boy cut off the branches and carried them away to build his house. And the tree was happy. But the boy stayed away for a long time. And when he came back, the tree was so happy. She could hardly speak. "Come, boy," she whispered, "come and play." "I am too old and sad to play," said the boy. "I want a boat that will take me far away from here. Can you give me a boat?" "Cut down my trunk and make a boat," said the tree. "Then you can sail away and be happy." And so the boy cut down her trunk and made a boat and sailed away. And the tree was happy, but not really. And after a long time, the boy came back again. "I am sorry, boy," said the tree, "but I have nothing left to give you. My apples are gone. My teeth are too weak for apples," said the boy. "My branches are gone," said the tree. "You cannot swing from them." "I am too old to swing on branches," said the boy. "My trunk is gone," said the tree. "You cannot climb." "I am too tired to climb," said the boy. "I am sorry," sighed the tree. "I wish that I could give you something, but I have nothing left. I am just an old stump. I am sorry." "I don't need very much now," said the boy. "Just a quiet place to sit and rest. I am very tired." "Well," said the tree, strengthening herself up as much as she could. "Well, an old stump is good for sitting and resting. Come, boy, sit down and rest." And the boy did, and the tree was happy. What do you think? You like it?
Yeah. I mean, it's really good. It's really good.
When I was reading it, I was so
I
afraid
feel
because like
bad.
this is gonna end bad. Like
I know. I thought
in
the
my
same thing.
mind,
I was like,
I thought it's gonna be like at some point he would come back and the tree wouldn't talk anymore. That's what I kind of envisioned when I was halfway through it. Is it a good ending? Like, do you think this is a happy poem or a sad poem?
I mean, it was such a good poem. I mean, man, I can't say it's happy. I do think it ends on a positive note a little bit. But at the same time, like you feel bad for this tree, like bro, like you're not
Yeah.
being valued. Like why are you? But the tree keeps saying that, like it's almost like her whole purpose or what brought the tree happiness was giving
Yeah.
and not really receiving. I mean, she wanted him to play, but at the same time, it was giving. It wasn't
Yeah.
receiving. So maybe it is positive. Like the tree just always throughout the tree's life was happy to
Yeah.
give and happy to
You,
be useful, I guess.
do you think there's a symbolism behind it? You think there's something the author was trying to like explain or say to the author, the listener? What do the listeners think? Leave
You
it in
know
the
what?
comments.
Leave in the comments. There you go. You're full on YouTuber now, boy. You know what? You know what's sad? I feel like the tree symbolizes parents, and then the child represents us as children.
You know what? I was thinking the same thing. But you know why? Because this boy grew up, right? Like at some point he was too old, so he was not a boy anymore. Yet up until the end, it says, "And the boy did." And who sees us as boys or girls, regardless of our age?
Parents, yeah.
Parents.
Yeah, our parents.
In this
And
case,
it broke my
like
heart.
a motherly figure, right? Because it says, "And she loved the little boy." So the tree is a woman or a girl.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's the symbolism there. That's where I think we agree that's what I saw there, that it's symbolizing how parents throughout a child's life will always be happy to give. But it also made me angry at the child for just using the parents, right? And not giving back a little bit, right? Because all the tree wanted was, oh, play with me, like spend some time with me. But the boy kept saying, well, I don't have time. I have my goals and my job. I want to make money. I want to make a house.
Yeah.
So I do think it's like a critique to children. Like, are you valuing what your parents while you have them, and give back a little bit? Because parents aren't asking, oh, buy me stuff. It's just spend time with them. So I don't know. It makes me value my mom, and make me like want to call her right now, and just tell her I love her.
It's also interesting how like it kind of explains how life gets a little more complicated as you age, right? This little boy at the beginning of the poem was happy just swinging from the tree, climbing up, being with the tree. And that made him happy and that made the tree happy. It was like a mutual exchange where both of them ended up feeling better. But as the boy progressed, his happiness changed while the tree didn't. The tree was still making the boy happy or spending time with the boy. That was its source of happiness in this poem. The boy, though, however, he had all these other plans. Like he wanted to have a house, a wife and children. He wanted to buy things. He wanted to have a boat. All these dreams that maybe at some point he forgot. And, if you look at the poem, the only time when the tree wasn't happy is when it said that the boy left for a long time. Like he would come back, very late, and the tree was happy, but not really. And I think that's where I agree with you, that it is a critique to children for, being maybe ungrateful or not seeing, how much they're asking or demanding for, and you could get mad at the boy in this scenario.
Oh yeah, I was angry when you were reading. I was like, this dude. My fear was that her, like, when he said, I want to build a house, I thought that's where the tree was gonna die. I thought he was gonna build the tree out of the corpse of the tree, But I mean, it's a children's book. Maybe that's why it didn't end so violently. But
Yeah,
but yeah, it did make me angry though. Hmm.
but it could also be like symbolic of how we, in most cases, the people and the listeners that have been blessed with having good parents, how we take on like from them at any stage of life. And it seems kind of like this uneven exchange where we are the
Yeah,
takers and they are the givers.
and that's it.
And
Yeah.
they're willing to give up till like up to the trunk, like up until like that's it, like there's nothing else to give. Like the tree was saying, like, I'm sorry, like I don't know what you came for, like I have nothing left, dude.
Ya déjame en paz, bro. Dang. Yeah.
But
But I
I
think,
mean that's what made the tree happy too. So I don't know, like I
yeah.
don't think like you can get mad at the boy, but the tree was willing to do it and it made him happy. It made her happy to be giving. So can we
Okay,
really get mad?
can we critique the tree though? Then
Did he give too much? Did he give more than he
the,
was able to?
well, I mean, again, to play the devil's advocate of like we could critique the tree too. I do understand that was bring happiness, but now the question is, was the tree bringing like spoiling the boy? Now, I guess is the word. Because the boy came back when he needed something, and oh yeah, take from me. So like we can critique the tree too, even though like it did bring the tree happiness, but was it the right decision? I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean,
You know what I was thinking too? It could be an prolonged way of saying we come back to our roots. Because if you
okay.
think about it, a tree has roots.
Yeah.
And the boy constantly at different stages in life came back to it. Whether he wanted
Oh,
money or he wanted all these things, he would come back to his roots. And it's kind of like this, cycle where like he would leave for a while, but then he would come back. Is that maybe that's what the author was trying to explain too?
yeah, maybe. Like, and do you mean like cultural roots, or do you mean just roots of like where you were raised?
Yeah, I mean, you take those lessons with. It's like they say, when you're a parent, like you take those lessons with you, no
Yeah.
matter what stage the boy was in. Even though he was an adult or an old man at the end of the poem, he was still a boy.
Yeah.
He had less experience than the tree, less knowledge, and he kept coming back to it. And it's that interaction of looking for that source of wisdom, that kind of takes us to the next step.
Wow. Man, it's so crazy how we could talk an hour over
Yeah,
books, that were or these poems that were designed more so for children. Again, this is something that makes me happy because it just shows the power of talking about a topic and diving a little bit deeper than just reading it that one time. So anyone who's listening or watching this, that what we covered was Shel Silverstein's various works. I covered more Where the Sidewalk Ends, and Carlos had a couple other different works that he highlighted. So we recommend. It's what do you think of this author? Because I chose him. What's your take?
I've actually really enjoyed him. This is an author that was completely new to me. Like I said, I've seen him at different stores. Like his art kind of, when you think of children's
Jumps
book,
out.
I think a lot of people that read, maybe more than I do, they would have instantly said him, right? Because he's very known too. But it was completely new, and I still had one more poem that we probably didn't get to. But it was easy to find something to share and kind of go over, and we invite the listeners to do the same. If
Yeah.
you're looking for a quick read, something to just enjoy an afternoon with, I think he's a good obvious choice.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you for tuning into this latest episode of the Re-Enrolled. Again, this is Joel.
And this is Carlos.
Super lagged. And it's all good. It's all good. Yeah, and then stay tuned. We're analyzing things weekly. We'll jump around from books to poems to current events or any really topic that we can dive
Yes.
into more. I don't want to use the word educationally because we're not no professors, but trying our best to look deeper than the surface level of whatever we're consuming.
See you
So
next time.
yes,